I welcome you to the Top 10 channel. Subscribe to the channel, put a like, and we start the next top. 10 serial killers who were shockingly released from prison early. When a serial murderer is found guilty of the most heinous acts, we frequently assume they will spend the remainder of their lives in prison, most certainly on death row. The court system, on the other hand, will always find fresh ways to enrage the broader population. The serial killers listed below committed the most heinous acts possible before being allowed back into society. Despite the victims' families' pleadings, these monsters are once again permitted to savor the taste of freedom. Even more disturbing, several of these serial killers went on to commit other murders. Karla Homolka. Karla Homolka and her husband Paul Bernardo, a serial killer from Canada, raped and murdered at least 3 women in the early 1990s. Tammy, Homolka's 15-year-old sister, was one of the victims, whom she offered to Bernardo as a sadistic gift. Animal tranquilizers were given to the young girl, causing her to choke on her own vomit. Following Bernardo's arrest in 1993, Homolka admitted to being an unwitting participant who acted out of fear of being killed herself if she didn't comply. For testifying against her husband, she was offered a plea bargain and was sentenced to only 12 years in prison. Later, videotapes were discovered that indicated Homolka was more than a willing accomplice in the murders. Homolka was freed from prison in 2007 and relocated to Quebec, where she remarried and had 2 children. She has sparked outrage among parents at a Montreal school where she helps on a regular basis. "We don't want her here," a lady identified only as Lily told Breakfast Television Montreal. "How would you feel if you found out your child was connecting with a serial killer? This isn't right." The Lane's Angels of Death. Waltraud Wagner, Maria Gruber, Irene Lidolf, and Stephanie Jameyer, Austrian nurses, became known as the Lane's Angels of Death after killing 49 patients at Lane's General Hospital between 1983 and 1989. Their actions were described by Austrian Chancellor Franz Vranitzky as the most cruel and horrible in Austria's history. With almost 2,000 employees, the hospital was Vienna's 4th largest medical facility. Wagner, who worked in the special care unit, administered a deadly amount of morphine to a patient, and she continued her murderous spree after that. Wagner enlisted the help of the other 3 ladies, who used morphine, insulin, and tranquilizers to murder their victims. A doctor overheard the nurses chuckling about their recent murder in a bar in February 1989 and reported it to the authorities. The 4 criminals were apprehended and confessed to the crimes. Wagner was found guilty of 15 murders, while Lidolf was found guilty of 5. Meyer and Gruber were given a reduced manslaughter term and were released after only a few years in prison. Wagner and Lidolf were also released in 2008, but their names have since been changed. Charlene Gallo. During the late 1970s, Charlene Gallo and her husband Gerald Gallo terrorized Sacramento, California, by kidnapping 10 people and keeping them as sex slaves before killing them. Charlene had been married twice and divorced the second time because her second husband was too boring. When she met Gerald, the two fell madly in love and connected over their mutual desire for raunchy sex. They then went on a bizarre rampage, luring young teenage females into a van and abducting them from a shopping mall. After then, the victims were chained, tortured, and murdered, with their remains dumped or buried. Charlene pled guilty to murder in 1984 and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. She relocated to Fair Oaks, California, after being released from prison and changed her identity. Gerald died of cancer while on death row. "I saw the murders every day," Charlene said in an interview after her release. "It's always there, it doesn't go away. There isn't a difference between the two. Every single one of them is an awful, horrible memory." Nikolai Jumagalyev. Nikolai Jumagalyev murdered his first victim in 1979, grabbing a woman from the streets of the Kazakh SSR, now Kazakhstan, and slicing her throat and consuming her blood. "I've always enjoyed to hunt, and I've gone hunting a lot, but this was my first time hunting a woman," he later explained. He was arrested the same year for shooting and killing a coworker after a drunken altercation. At Moscow Serbsky Institute, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and granted a reduced sentence of manslaughter, allowing him to walk free a year later. Jumagalyev killed a total of 10 people and served their remains to unsuspecting dinner guests. He had brought several people to his house in 1980. One of them was slain, and the body was dismembered in the adjacent room. His remaining visitors ran in terror, and when the cops arrived, they discovered Jumagalyev on his knees, bloodied, nude, and wielding a hatchet. They also discovered a woman's decapitated head after examining the house. He was sent to a high-security mental clinic in a village near Almaty, where he works as a repairman now. Juha Valjakala. Juha Valjakala, 23, and his then-girlfriend Marita Ruutalami, 21, were vacationing to Msele, Sweden, in 1988. He stole a bicycle around midnight and was pursued by the owner, Sten Nielsen, and Nielsen's 15-year-old son to a nearby cemetery, where Valjakala killed both of them with a shotgun. Valjakala lured Nielsen's worried wife into the woods and stabbed her neck later, while she was seeking for her husband and son. Valjakala and his girlfriend immediately fled, but were apprehended a week later in Odense, Denmark. Valjakala and his girlfriend both blamed each other for the murders during the trial. Valjakala was diagnosed as a psychopath with very aggressive tendencies during a mental evaluation. For involvement in assault and battery, he was sentenced to life in prison, while his girlfriend received only 2 years. The Supreme Court of Finland concluded in 2009 that he would be released on probation. He changed his name to Nikita Bergenström in 2013. "I wasn't meant to murder anyone," he stated in an interview after his release. "It's simply gotten out of hand." Cybrand, Louis, Van Shore. Cybrand, Louis, Van Shore, a security guard, was dubbed South Africa's worst serial killer in 1992. When Shore was employed as a security guard in Cape Town, he was convicted of shooting 39 burglars over the course of 3 years. He shot suspects with his 9mm parabellum after responding to quiet alarms that were triggered on the business grounds. All of the victims were black or mixed-race people. Authorities never issued a single warning to the former cop because he was found to have acted lawfully. That is, until the victims' families brought him to trial for 7 murders and 2 attempted murders. He was sentenced to Fort Glamorgan Prison in East London, South Africa, after being found guilty of all offences by the Supreme Court. Then, in 2004, he was released after serving only 12 years of his 20-year sentence. He gave a press conference, expressing his joy at being free and urging the public not to judge him based on his past. "I apologize if my action caused any hurt or inconvenience to the families and friends of my victims," Shore said. "I have served my time," he added. Arnfin Nessette. Arnfin Nessette became the head nurse and manager of a big nursing home in Senior Trindelag, Norway, in 1977. However, by 1981, there were numerous suspicions about the high frequency of mortality among senior patients aged 67 to 94. When authorities interrogated Nessette, he confessed to killing 27 patients by injecting them with the muscle relaxant succinylmethonium chloride. Nessette was first charged with 25 counts of homicide, but later recanted his confession and rejected all allegations, alleging that he was interrogated under duress. The trial lasted 6 months, and the lead prosecutor, Olaf Jackhelm, described him as an ambitious man who desired ultimate control over the lives and death of his victims. Nessette was found guilty of murdering 22 people in 1983. During his stay at the nursing home, he duped residents out of $1,800, and a jury found him guilty of embezzlement. The true number of victims was estimated to be about 132. The maximum penalty under Norwegian law is 21 years in prison, however Nessette was freed after 12 years for good behavior. He is presently residing under a different name in an unknown area. David McGreevy. David McGreevy cruelly murdered 3 children, ages 4, 2, and 9 months, in 1973. As he impaled the victims on a neighbor's fence and told authorities he killed them because kids wouldn't stop wailing, he was called the "Monster of Worcester." McGreevy should have received a considerably lengthier term, according to the children's mother, who resides in Hampshire, England. They said he was going in for life, then they altered it to, at least, 20 years, but he hasn't done 60 years, she told the BBC. He killed 3 people, not just 1 or 2. McGreevy was unexpectedly released in June of this year. The panel will have carefully examined a wide range of evidence, including details of the original evidence and any evidence of behavior change, the parole board added. We take tremendous care in doing so, and public safety is our first priority. He was no longer a threat to the public, according to a psychiatrist, who defended his better self-control and the fact that Mr. McGreevy has learned to remain calm in stressful situations. Under severe circumstances, the triple child killer is now free to live in the United Kingdom. Somkid Pumpuang. Somkid Pumpuang was called the Thai Jack the Ripper in 2007 for murdering 5 women in cold blood. All of the victims were nightclub performers and masseuses. Pumpuang was condemned to life in prison but was released early due to his reputation as a model prisoner. He murdered a hotel maid named Rosami Mulichand just 7 months after his parole. Pumpuang had managed to get Mulichand into a relationship by claiming to be a lawyer. He moved into her apartment after she let him, and he murdered her in cold blood. She told her daughter and neighbors that she was planning to marry the man on December 15, which was the day she died, said investigator Colonel Kajornrat Wongrat. That day, my partner went missing as well. A manhunt was launched, with a prize of 50,000 baht given for any information. After 2 students spotted him on a train in the Nong Sarai neighborhood, he was re-arrested. It is expected that he will spend the remainder of his life in prison. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez, dubbed the "Monster of the Andes," is a Colombian serial killer who began his criminal career by stealing cars, earning him his first prison sentence. He was sexually assaulted while incarcerated, and he later admitted to stalking and killing anyone who had been hostile towards him. Lopez went on a murder rampage in Peru after being released from prison, primarily targeting young females. He was eventually apprehended by a native Ayachuco's village, who meant to execute the serial killer, but an American missionary intervened and convinced them to turn him over to the state police. Lopez served 14 years in Peru's Garcia Moreno prison before being released on good behavior in 1981. He relocated to Ecuador and then Colombia, where he began butchering 3 girls every week on average. He had abducted and murdered almost 300 people by the time he was apprehended for the 3rd time. Nobody believed he was capable of such atrocities until a vast cemetery was discovered, containing the bodies of many of his victims. He was judged sane and released on $50 bond in 1998, but his whereabouts remain unknown to this day. Subscribe to the channel and like it. There are still many interesting stories ahead.